I was just speaking of Jesus. This is a total tangent, but in the last week and a half, I just spent some time with Randall Carlson, who works with Graham Hancock. He's a sort of geologist, esotericist. And then Brian Muraresku, who wrote this book called The Immortality Key, which is all about these like ancient mystery rituals, these Eleusinian mystery rituals that took place in Greece, and Socrates, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Plato, they all went through these things. And both of them agree. This is kind of a heretical belief. They think that Jesus never died. And that if you read the text, Pilate, who was the governor of Rome, or of that little contingency of Rome at the time, poked Jesus's flesh with the spear, and it was to see whether he was dead or not. But they think maybe Jesus was given a sedative, and it was sort of either a mystery ritual, or he like faked his own death, and then he was put in a shroud of like resuscitating herbs by this guy Joseph of Arimathea, and then he survived and maybe even had a bloodline like and like into today or something, which is really fascinating. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely heretical. Yeah,
it's heretical, right? Yeah. So I don't know, but
who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Are you interested at all in the Bible or anything?
I'm super interested. Yes, in the Bible, but not just the Bible. I don't discount religion. Like I used to be this inexorable, uncompromising atheist.
Yeah.
From 8 years old.
Yeah.
Up until a few years ago.
Yeah, I used to be a fan of like, the Four Horsemen, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens. Who was the fourth in the Fourth Horseman? And Dawkins, of course. And they were just, it's like
and I loved watching
the God delusion and God is not great, and all that stuff. Yeah, it was great. And then I started to realize, I don't know, I just think there's so much weirdness that we can't explain to the world. And even through a physics lens, like I'm interested in the anthropic principle and sort of the Goldilocks environment that we live in. And to me, that signals possible intelligent design and anomalies in evolution as well. And so I don't know whether that's God. God to me is sort of a placeholder term, but something mystical and intelligent.
Have you heard of Dembski?
No.
So Dembski, I would like to look through this. And by the way, me saying that I'm no longer this inexorable atheist doesn't mean that I'm now this devout religious person. It just means I don't deride the religious, and I investigate and take it seriously. Dembski has an argument based in math, which I would like to go through, much like Donald Hoffman's. Which Stephen Meyer, who's a proponent of intelligent design, uses. Which says, I think it says something like the search space of DNA, or of the search space of evolution is too vast to have outputted this complexity this fast, something like that.
Totally.
But he uses something called the no free lunch theorem, or no free lunch theorems. And that is by David Wolpert, who was a guest on Taupe. And David Wolpert has this whole article saying like, Dembski misused my arguments, and he also used them in words. And he's like, you need to make it mathematically precise. And there are two types of arguments. One where it's like art and literature and religious and so on, and that's a word type argument. And then there's like the domain of the specifically defined, which is mathematical. And there are only few results in the specifically defined, and some of them are like Gödel's incompleteness theorem and the no free lunch theorems. Those are limiting theorems or no-go theorems, but they're extremely powerful because they're precise. And he's like, his is in the just words arguments, which means you can't tell if it's true or not true. You can't even make a decision.
Right.
That's what Wolpert says. So I want to get Wolpert to talk with Dembski on the channel. And just,
interesting.
Hash it out.
Interesting. So yeah, true. Just words. It's like not even wrong or something.
Exactly.
Interesting. What do you make of? You've talked to a lot of the same people as me on the UFO front. What do you make of that world? And then why don't I get even more concrete? Do you have a specific theory there? Because there is so much smoke and mirrors in that world.
Yeah.
And it is hard to get to the bottom of that haystack.
Yeah. So why do you think there is so much disinformation? Like, is that itself a clue? This is something, by the way, I was talking to Ryan Graves about, which on another podcast, recorded for 39 minutes of a 2-hour podcast. They flew me to Boston for this. I remember I have such a hard time sleeping. Jesse, I have insomnia. And it's a crippling.
Oh no.
It's
Melatonin doesn't help?
it sometimes helps, but I don't
Okay.
like to take it too frequently because
Yeah.
I'm extremely cautious about being addicted or building tolerance to anything, including like caffeine. Like I drink, I make sure I note which days I drink coffee. So
That's
that I don't-
awesome.
Yeah. But anyhow, so that was frustrating. But I was speaking with him, with Ryan Graves, about yes. That the way that I look at this is in terms of clues, but yes, rather in terms of clues. So some people say, yeah, where's the proof? Well, firstly, in science, there is no proof of anything. There's no proof. You don't even think in terms of proof. You think in terms of evidence.
Yeah.
And plausible arguments and models and so on.
Yes.
But I think for here, the best way for me to conceptualize this is like Sherlock Holmes, and then there's clues.
Yes.
So Sherlock Holmes doesn't discount something because only one person said it.
Yes.
Instead, he takes it extremely seriously. I don't think he's ever said, yeah, but I'm not going to listen to that person because of so and so and so.
Yes.
And then not only that, so he incorporates, then he puts together, he prunes this tree, this like Ramos tree, that of conjectural tree down to one solution by considering what is. Well, he even said, I think, what's that phrase? The removal of the impossible, what remains is only what is, or something like that.
Oh, I've never heard that. That's cool.
Yeah. Something like if you remove all that is impossible, then what remains has to be what is or what is possible, something like that. And he even sees non-evidence as evidence. So one of the famous stories is there was a dog that didn't bark in some robbery or so. I forget what it was. And if that was me, I would just not think much about that. Firstly, I wouldn't notice that a dog didn't bark.
Yeah.
How do you notice the absence of something,
Yeah.
let alone take that and be like, that's important? So it came into play later in the story because he's like, that dog always barks.
Right.
Why didn't it bark? Because it must have known the intruder. Otherwise, it would have barked. So then he whittled down who the possible suspects could be. So anyway, now I'm wondering, well, given that there's so much disinformation, is that itself a clue? Given that there's a lack of information, is that itself a clue?
Yeah.
To what? I don't know. What do you think?
It's a great question. I mean, I honestly oscillate back and forth. They're like, it feels like maybe by design.
What do you hope it is?
My hope is that there's some ontological truth around like beings that are benevolent, that we could like ascend into their sort of state. And then my intuition is that there's a combination of those beings and bad ones, and that we're sort of in the midst of a cosmic war, and we're low-level instantiations or pawns in that cosmic war, which sounds insane, I realize.
Yeah. Have you heard of the Dark Forest?
No.
So the three-body problem?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You've read it?
I haven't. I've started the first one, but no, I don't.
Can you tell me about it?
I know he has sort of like it's like the aliens sort of stagnate the physics so we don't blow ourselves up or whatever.
So as far as I know, it's something, it's like, so here's something that I think about frequently, is that if you're exploring any topic, or if you're doing research in any topic, I think you should explore the boundaries and have an answer to the question of what could the answer possibly be that would make me burn my hands and not investigate this. So meaning, like, for instance, AI. I have a feeling that the people developing, people at OpenAI and Google Brain and Microsoft, whatever their research component is, that they could be creating the tools of civilization's demise.
Yeah.
And they need to be thinking about that deeply.
Yeah.
And same with Richard Feynman said this about the bomb. They weren't thinking about they were just so fascinated by the physics.
Yeah.
It was just fun to do research.
Yeah.
They weren't thinking about how many millions of lives would be destroyed and how horrific and how the world would change forever. And Einstein said that he would burn his hands had he known. He would never have signed off saying, like, you should build the bomb based on E equals MC squared and so on.
Right.
He said after the bombs had dropped, he's like, I would have burned my hands. I would not have done that.
And Oppenheimer's, I am Shiva, the destroyer of worlds or whatever. Like, yeah.
So then I wonder about the UFO scene. So some people, they're like, I want disclosure. Well, firstly, like, that presumes the government has, well, I think the government has more information. Almost everyone can agree on that.
I think
Almost
so,
everyone.
yeah.
But, well, full disclosure, whether that comes from the government or we actually find out what this is, like, do you want to know? Do you truly want to investigate this? Do you know?
I think about this all the time.
There is something to say about Pandora's box. There are truths that make you just want to recoil in horror.
100%.
Unless you want to say that truth is by nature good, in which case that's like a religious statement, and that's a deep one, and I hope that's true.
Yeah.
Like, if you truly believe that, well, what's your evidence? Speaking about evidence, people want to say, well, where's your proof?
Yeah.
But anyhow, as someone immersed in the exploration of physics, consciousness, and math, I recognize the importance of supporting my body and my mind. This journey of discovery led me to a remarkable find, Mosh bars. Mosh is a venture by Maria Shriver and Patrick Schwarzenegger and is at the forefront of blending nutrition with a mission to foster brain health awareness. With 6 mouth-watering flavors, there's a taste for just about every palate, even a selection of plant-based options for those preferring vegan nutrition. Personally, I found the chocolate sea salt flavor to be a delightful addition to my day, post-workout especially. In fact, I recorded myself biting into a bar for the first time.
How's the flavor?
It's great. That was real. If you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and your brain at the same time, Mosh bars are a great choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/toe to save 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers or plant-based trial pack at moshlife.com/TOE. Thank you to Mosh for sponsoring this video. But anyhow, so the Dark Forest story is where I think we're 200 years in the future, and there's this Chinese scientist, and she finds a way to contact other civilizations, if they're out there, by shooting some message to the sun, and it broadcasts it intergalactically.
Yeah.
So she does that, and she says, like, we're here, please help us. We're humans that are on this earth, and so on. She gets a message back, and it says, we heard you. If you know what's good for you, you will not send another message. Stop. Do not send any more messages.
Wow.
And she doesn't know where it's from. Maybe she knows where it's from, like some galaxy over there. And she's like, she thinks about it, and she says, she said another message. She's like, I'm sorry, Earth is too barbaric. We're at war. People dislike each other. There's racism, etc.
Yeah.
Please, we're a primitive civilization. You're far more advanced than us. Come save us. It turns out that initial message came from some galaxy. I've forgotten the galaxy, but it comes from a civilization called the Trisolarians. Trisolarians, like 3 suns.
Yeah.
Trisolarians. They have this civilization. They're monitoring the skies, like looking for people who are going to talk to them. Why? Well, you get the answer, but you'll get the answer soon. They go and they find the other scientists who sent that other message that replied that said, don't send any more replies.
Yeah.
They find them. They execute that person because you're supposed to be listening and tell your higher ups, like, look, we found another civilization.
Right.
And it's because Earth has a resource and we didn't know that we had this resource. So we think of our resources as like uranium or silver deposits or water or the Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
But it's so much more fundamental than that. The resource that we have is stability. The fact that we can even formulate laws of physics is like what Wolfram would call a pocket of reducible complexity.
Yeah.
Like we live in a place that we can even say F equals ma or E equals mc squared. And then we look out at the universe and we see anomalies and we think, oh, that's because we don't have the right laws. And it's because the laws just don't work the way that you think they work. You're in a pocket of great stability.
Yeah.
So this is something that other civilizations desperately want because they live in chaos. And so as soon as they hear this, the Trisolarians, they then start to come to Earth and they tell the Earthlings that we're coming. And some of the Earthlings, like today, they're split. They're like, no, these are gods coming to save us. They're actually good. Let's communicate back with them. And you hear this today. And then the other half is like, no, these are demons, which is another rhetoric you hear.
Yeah.
Stay away. So anyway,
that's fascinating. But it's almost like a Rorschach for the person or something. It's like, what's their orientation? And that defines whether they think it's angels or demons or aliens or. So you're touching on something fascinating because I do think we seem to emphasize.
It makes me tremble talking about.
I'm saying it trips me out.
Yeah, like these are tough subjects, man.
They are, and if you like intuitively, I sometimes get the sense that we emphasize sort of nuts and bolts and crafts and ETs and science exploration and all that seems fun. And actually that's somewhat of a distraction. Yeah. And there's some sort of core ontological truth that is jarring if a person were to understand it. and that's maybe the hidden thing.
Or convince themselves of it, because there's some truths that are extremely, extremely convincing that it's so difficult to unconvince yourself of, and it could be false. So
yeah, I don't know.
It's so tricky.
Yeah,
and there's some truths, quote unquote truths, that are so damaging. I think if someone hasn't thought deeply enough, if someone doesn't think so, then you definitely have not thought deeply enough about it, about anything.
Yeah.
Like it's just truly think yourself. Oh my gosh, like I can barely compose the words to talk about some of. Well,
yeah. Well, do you think that certain heterodox scientists in the past? Let's frame this differently, because clearly in the distant past, heterodox scientists have been persecuted. So Galileo or Giordano Bruno or people like that. That would make me think maybe in the recent past, there are scientists who have been persecuted for having heterodox ideas, like in the 20th century. Do you think that any of that is true? Like, there are obviously all the conspiracies around Tesla and his work. I mean, do you think that these are just sort of crazy fringe conspiracies?
So here's one story that I don't know what to make of it, and I haven't heard an explanation of. Edward Lee Sullivan. Have you heard of him?
No.
Edward Lee Sullivan's this 5'2" person, super skinny, because all he ate was sardines, apparently, and crackers, and was a recluse, just alone. I don't even think he had a wife, but even if it doesn't make a difference to the story, he didn't have friends. And he built what I believe is called Coral Mountain. So you can overlay whatever this is correctly.
Oh, Coral Gables.
I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's these massive stone structures that are precise to the millimeter, that to this day, you would need teams and huge machinery to get even close, and it's still not as precise. But the point is that Edward Lee Sullivan said he understood the laws of electricity and magnetism, and he understood how the pyramids were made. But he would never tell anyone. And sometimes children would peer through and try and see, like, how are you making it? And then he would just stop doing what. And so I'm so curious for why, if you had the secrets, and how did you do it? There's apparently the infamous story of like a gate at Coral Gardens?
Gables, I think.
Yeah. So there's this gate that it's 2 tons, however many. It's extremely heavy. And it's on a divot or a rivet where pushing it is like so smooth. But then afterward, there was some storm or some issue happened, and then it became stuck. So then they had to re-put it in place. Like, now. Yeah. And they took many people and plenty of machinery, and now it's nowhere near as smooth, even though we have so much machinery. He just did it by himself. That's so as far as we can tell.
Yeah, and there's like all sorts of megalithic architecture from thousands of years ago, when we didn't have anywhere close to the civil engineering that we have today, and we couldn't even recreate those things now with our current civil engineering. So I do think it's valid to inquire into that and ask questions there. And I guess the Tesla thing I was sort of getting at, maybe this is BS, was like, I think he was doing 0-point experiments. Like, that was always the holy grail for him in Westinghouse in Long Island. And it was like funded by JP Morgan, and then the funding was pulled. And the question is, like, the government this is not a conspiracy. The government did like lock up his files. And actually, the person who went through the files is John Trump, who's Trump's uncle, who is a very prominent scientist at the Rad Lab at MIT. Wow. So a radar expert, and he worked with Vannevar Bush and all the top scientists of that day. And the question is always like, did Tesla discover something fundamentally new that was hidden, or is that just BS?
What is your intuition?
I don't know.
You're undecided on that.
Undecided. I'd say he probably didn't, would be my guess, but I find it interesting.
Yeah. What you bring up is extremely important, meaning that, namely, that scientists, the heterodox, meaning like they have some different point of view or different belief, they get scorned and disparaged for talking about it publicly. And then the question is, then they'll say, the objection is, there is no evidence for what you're saying. And most of these scientists would say, you're right, so can we look for it? Yes. How do we find the evidence without inquiring about it? Are we not allowed to even question? If you enjoyed this toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core Toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.